Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. That is, if you're still with us, this is Tim May with the Tim May Show. My co-pilot, my able-bodied co-pilot, Matt Wilhelm, former Ohio State middle linebacker when they won a national championship way back in 2002. Yes, those kind of seasons don't come along very often. Former NFL quarterback, Super Bowl winning, linebacker. Did I call you a quarterback to begin with, Matt? That's the esteem I
You,
hold you
you
in, even
did.
though you were actually a
Well,
linebacker.
thank you. Quarterback of the defense. Quarterback of
Yeah,
the
there you
defense. There you
go.
go.
Anyway, too much time was wasted on that intro to begin with. Everybody knows who you are now. If they don't, Google it. Uh, but Matt, here we sit, Ohio State in limbo right now with the college football playoff uh, final pairings to be set on Sunday, December the 8th. We all know what's in Ohio State's rearview mirror, smoldering ruins of yet of a fourth straight Michigan, of a fourth straight loss to Michigan. Armored personnel carriers, tanks, everything smoldering in the background in the war that was more of a war than it should have been. And when you play into the other team's only chance of winning the game, you deserve what you got. And yes, Ohio State's going to be playing the college football playoff in some form or fashion where they will host or go to, let's say, Tennessee for that first round game. That remains to be seen. But we'll cover that a week from now. As you look back on the smoldering ruins, what stands out the most to you, Matt Wilhelm, Ohio State alum, former player, lost twice to Michigan and then won twice over Michigan? Thought you'd turn this thing around forever in '01 and '02, the first 2 years of Tressel. But man, this thing has boomeranged, baby.
It has. I found myself at a little bit of a loss for words following the football game, with a
Wait a minute,
sense
you
of
mean words you could say
frustration.
out loud
Yes, or words I could say to my
in
son, who
public?
also watched the football game with me, right?
Yeah.
Who knows those words as well, but doesn't use them. Um, I also found myself kind of sick to my stomach because not to the point that I expected the game to be a blowout, which a lot of people in the I guess the spread of what 21 plus points or
Yeah.
20 plus points might
I
have
think it ended
led
up
us to fall the
19,
belief.
but that's still three touchdowns. Go ahead.
Correct is I expected a win in some capacity, and so much had to do with the and this is again the other sense of frustration that I have, and I guess is my closing take is I'm kind of done with the words of Ohio State football and Ohio State football players and referencing the game and referencing the motivation factors and the leave no doubt and the unfinished business.
And the X'd out
Because
M's. Go ahead.
yeah, the X out ends. It's like at this point right now, it's like just shut up and go do it inside the white lines. And that's not even addressing what happened after the football game, which we can talk about,
Oh yeah.
later in the show. Is I'm just done with it all. I'm done with the hype. I'm done with the 5-star recruiting classes and the top 5 recruiting classes, and this guy's going to do this and this guy's going to do that, and it goes back to, and I hate to say it, and this is my one opportunity because I don't get it many times in my household to say I told you so. Is I wrote out and scripted out the recipe for this game being close, which was Michigan getting into heavy personnel, running the football, bleeding the clock, strategically throwing the football, which again you can potentially maybe call what they did in the passing game strategically throwing the football or the lack thereof it,
Got
but
some
just
drives alive
bleeding.
doing it. Good.
Sure, absolutely, but just bleeding this game out. And I think also, then now going backwards and hearing some of Sharon Moore's comments leading into the game and the interview with Jenny Taft or whoever it was right before the game about like there's a specific way this game needs to go. It's a specific brand of football that we're going to play that we believe is going to be enough for us to be successful today. Does that mean he was predicting a win? Of course, he's going to have confidence that he's going to go out and win a football game.
Yeah.
No Colston Loveland, no Will Johnson at corner, and obviously the carousel that was quarterbacks at Michigan all season long. I also pointed out that 50-6 win at Northwestern or against Northwestern, that you just don't score 50 points in the Big Ten on accident. when you have yet to have a lot of offensive success all year long. And I think that they found something, whatever that happened to be. And frankly, what I was, I guess, most surprised with, and why the words coming out of the Woody Hayes facility really don't matter much to me anymore leading into any game, but especially this game, is they ran the football fairly successfully, which fits their brand. They didn't pop a run the way they had in years prior, but their defensive front and their ability to stop our run game. So 2 running backs, both of which are probably going to be top 60 picks, top 75 picks in the National Football League, couldn't pop a run of more than 10 yards, which I think Quinshon Judkins might have had one for maybe 11 or 12 yards at some point in the third quarter. And then, of course, gets up, talk smack about it, but then we get smacked by not getting many yards from that point forward. And I think what really showed its head for us was the offensive line play. That the loss of Simmons and Seth McLaughlin, the leader, going back a couple of weeks ago, getting hurt ahead of the Indiana game, and the carousel and the moving around that we had along the offensive line just was not good enough. And what really was very telling to me, and I think, again, watching Ryan Day's post-game press conference, was trying multiple schemes in the run game to try to create some success. Okay, the zone scheme didn't work, so we're going to try the gap scheme. The gap scheme didn't work, so we're going to try the counter game, or the this or the that. And it's like, you're telling me that you're Ohio State and you can't just line up and play football against your rival, who you have 364 days to recruit against and to prepare for. And I think that's a lot of what is wrong with where we're at right now, and a lot to do with why Ohio State has gone 0-4 in the last 4 games against this team up north.
Here's been my take ever since the game. It was actually my take during the game. If you were sitting around, probably should have recorded that. Me and the guys around me in the press box as we kept talking, and I just kept going. They're playing right into Ohio State's hand. They're playing right into Michigan's hands. I'm talking about Michigan's defense. They're doing exactly what Michigan needs them to do for Michigan to stop them on a fairly consistent basis. They're insisting on running the ball right when they've got something going, throwing the ball. Let me get to this. It's almost like the Ohio State offensive coaches thought Mason Graham was not going to be playing on Saturday instead of Will Johnson. I just go, when their stud defensive tackle has 7 tackles in the game, you have misjudged, misread the situation, and you're insistent on going, we're tougher than you are, when everybody knows. We talked about this last week on this show. The only thing that mattered coming out of Saturday was not the P word, which is pride, not the T word, which is tougher. The only thing that mattered was the W, which means win, over the victors valiant. And you have Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate. Yes, Carnell Tate dropped a key pass in the fourth quarter that might have ignited something on that little crossing route, where if he'd caught it, he might still be running, but he definitely would have picked up 15 or 20 yards past the catch. That was huge. That was one of only 2 possessions Ohio State had in the second half. I think Ohio State ran 7 total plays in the second half. 4 of them was that futile last possession, which ballooned the number of passes thrown, obviously, to 33. Because I don't know if you heard me, but I asked Ryan Day about whether they should have gone more wholesale to the pass, and he said, "Well, they did throw it 33 times." I would never actually get into with Ryan Day in a post-game press conference to the extent of he hasn't committed murder, he hasn't committed a crime. You know what I mean? All I'm questioning there was basically the game plan from the get-go, because when they threw the ball coming out of the gate, they did drive to a field goal. When they threw the ball just before halftime, just went to a 2-minute offense and threw the ball, they got their only touchdown. And then where did that go? Their mismatch was in the second.
Well, Tim, the one thing that's super frustrating, I think, as even just a viewer who's a fan of good football, is if we could go to a bar and get nice and sloppy drunk if we had $1 for every time that Joe Klatt said exactly what you're just saying,
I
which
know.
is, I just don't know why, and this is happening in real time, why we're, running a zone scheme into the boundary, or why we're playing right into Michigan's strength, which is their
Yes.
defensive front and all those transfers, and not spreading them out and making it basketball on grass. And I think, without being so overly critical of Ryan Day and this crew, but like this feels like it was a preconceived notion all week that you're going to prove to everybody that we can run the football, that
Yeah.
we're bigger and we're tougher, and their ego and pride in the moment got the best of us.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. And I know that, gosh, you can say, well, Will Howard threw 2 interceptions and Fielding missed 2 field goals. Well, that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, and it's recruit better players, recruit a better kid. You're Ohio State. I also believe that anybody, saying Devin after the second interception, you should have gone to Devin Brown. That's just a fan take, who's just flying off and grasping at a straw. But to have as many skill players as we have, and given what we were throwing the football up against on the edges at corner and safety for Michigan, I will, again, everyone in college football, poll the coaches, and everybody, and every high school coach would take their players, our receivers, our skill over their skill on the edges. Maybe not even 9 times out of 10, but 10 times out of 10 if you've
Yep.
watched enough film. And why we didn't, and we were so strategic with it, trying to hide it off of play action. Well, you can't honor the run anymore because they can with 6, physicality up front, lack. There was, again, I'll tell you, the one time we did change scheme, and it was like a wham scheme. When we did pop that Quinshon Junkins run, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And I like rattled off the play. I think it was like wham, or, off of a counter look or something of that sort, which is, again, we went from zone scheme to gap scheme. It was odd. It was that odd of a run for us because it was against our scheme. But are we really like grasping for whatever was going to work in the game?
Yeah.
And I was befuddled by it, to be honest.
Yeah. You should have been befuddled. Everybody was befuddled. The word I used too was squandered, because obviously the 2 missed field goals were huge. Their kicker was 2 out of 2. Ohio State's kicker, Jaden Fielding, was 1 out of 3. That ended up being the difference in the game when you really boil it all down. You got to score touchdowns, but boy, if you can't, sometimes the field goals, as I described it in our post game video at Lettermen Row and then on Channel 10, that against Michigan this year, a field goal was a gold brick. It was a gold brick. That doesn't mean you're gold bricking, but it was a brick of gold, and you had to seize it you had to seize points wherever you could, right?
And, and here's the fact of the matter is, as a defensive player, when whether a turnover in minus territory where you're almost like in the high red zone or red zone, it's your job is to put out a fire, which means no points is the ultimate, right? Where they miss a field goal or go for it on 4th down, don't get it, and you give the ball back to your offense in minus territory, and you've got to go 80, 85, 90 yards as well. So 0 is the ultimate win. A field goal is a satisfactory win because and consolation for not giving up 7 points, right? Because that's where the game really can get out of hand by one side. And on the flip side, to go into that territory and get 0, multiple times in a game like this. And again, I know Ryan Day referenced it multiple times in his post-game press conferences. Like it's a battle. Every yard counts. Every point counts. And it's just unfortunate that you came away. And again, also Joe Klatt talking about our red zone defense and our red zone offense by, about being top 10 in the country and on both sides, which is why we've been so efficient, and come away the way that we did was a lot to do with the demise and why we ended up losing the football game.
Let me ask you this. On Michigan's last possession, they drove to the field goal. I think it was a 27-yard run by Mullings. Ohio State was on the scene. It was like 5 fire trucks had shown up at the fire as the fire was just getting started. You know what I mean? I'm talking about Mullings. and he wiggled his way through there and basically puts them in field goal territory. Field goal
Well,
makeable
like chip shot
territory.
territory. Otherwise, they were on the fringe at that point, of a
Correct.
long field goal. But
Correct.
now they're in chip shot, guarantee 3-point territory for a quality kicker like they have.
Correct. And also able to whittle the clock down,
Yeah.
past that. But I'm just going, was that the damn, you're a former defensive player. I'm not kidding you. They had arrived at the scene of the crime. And do you ever give it up to the other team and the other player, just like he did against USC, saved the day against USC with a very long run? Or Michigan would have gone into this game 5-6 and looking to be bowl eligible. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Yeah.
do you ever give it up? Just, I think we can on this show give it up to the other player and team, but boy, that player made a play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this point right now, with emotions so high, you're probably so self-reflective on what we
Introspective.
didn't do.
Yeah.
Introspective, self-reflective on what we didn't do. We had five hats there, and he didn't make it. He didn't make it. He didn't make it. He didn't make it, to the point where, like, then you put a period or exclamation point, to the point where you don't ever shift to, like, well, God, what a hell of a play, what a hell of a run.
Yeah.
Or in some cases it's a coach's call, right? What a call.
Yeah.
To have balls big enough to make that call on fourth down, or that type of call. You saw the Marshall game on the fake field goal late, to help them win their conference and go to their conference championship. So you, at this point right now, it's probably all too fresh for you to ever just go. And I think we saw, also Ryan Day do it as minimally and respectfully as possible. Is like, credit to them for winning the game, for coming in here.
Yeah.
It at some point, maybe when you watch the film, you just go, gosh, had we made that play. But God, it's like you have to have the same respect for them as you sometimes do, regardless of what uniform they wear or what university they go to. That, when Travion or Quinchon makes that second effort, third effort play and pops a run, that
Yep.
you just go, man, what a player. And I think that's what Mullins really represented in that moment.
Yeah. And it is amazing. I mean, you do have to give some kudos to guys making plays, because I've always said there are two things that matter in the game, and it's not what you're saying during the week, it's not the countdown clock, it's not Xing out M's, it's not all the BS, that makes you concentrate even more on the game. It's when you get into the game, uh, executing, and then somebody making plays, somebody stepping up and making.
And to that point, as I watched the football game, Tim, and I'm sure Buckeye Nation felt this way, and you guys up in the press box felt this way. But when Jack Sawyer intercepts the football, down on the 3-4 yard line,
That
whatever
was
it
it.
happened to be,
Right at the goal line. Yeah.
Sharon Moore broke tendency to try to catch us, from just bleeding and running the football. 2 yards in cloud of dust, got a little impatient, wanted to go for the jugular, calls a pass play. Jack Sawyer was probably supposed to be playing his gap, but sniffed out, and just felt like maybe the guy wasn't attacked, like was pass blocking him, not run blocking him, and he drops off, makes the interception. Gosh, I wish he would have ran out of maybe another tackle or two to get maybe to the 30 or 35 and, get out of that backed up end up. But then that shifted everything.
Yeah.
And then subsequently, Joe Klatt also talked about this. Like, what was it? Pass, run, pass, or run, pass,
Run, pass, run thing. Yeah.
On a three and out of three, like, out of the box non-Ohio State identity calls as well. One is that then obviously included the Carnell Tate drop, correct?
Right. That would have been, that was the Jack Sawyer play literally flipped the game. And then the
Yes.
drop by Carnell Tate, who had a great game,
He
where
did.
he'd still be running maybe. I mean, it was that
Yes.
open. What a great, I go, come back to that same play. Come back to the same. They couldn't, just because you ran it the play before doesn't mean they're going to cover it any better. Come back to that same play. And of course they didn't. But those were the two plays, flipped it. And Ohio State almost didn't get the ball back after that. So
correct. And it's I thought I thought Joe Klatt, that he does a great job, and I think he's very honest.
Yeah.
He's very introspective on both sides. He's not a homer by any regards. That changed it for Ohio State. I think giving the football back to Michigan, and then maybe I'll say subsequently, 2 first downs, the way in which they got those first downs, which was 3 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, first down,
Yeah.
5 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, first down. And then then Mullins pops the run, down inside the down inside the 10, 15 yard line. Was it having covered enough football and me having played in enough football games, it just squeezed the game to where the opportunity for Ohio State to win that football game was going to be in a 2-minute scenario with probably, again, without knowing the clock, but probably around a minute or less, with no timeouts, which means sideline, you got to throw to the sidelines, you got to throw for first downs, or you're going to have to clock everything, or you're going to have to throw the ball into the ground. Incompletions is like, it would be perfection to manage the clock, to then also get into even field goal territory with a kicker who's missed his last 2 into the wind.
Yeah.
Which has been a factor all day.
Yep.
It just, to me, after we punted the football away and they got those couple of first downs and then, and then took the lead, I just knew that it was too much for us at that point. We had squandered our opportunity to throw the football where they can just, drop 7, drop 8, close the windows, protect the sidelines, and had squeezed the game on those, 3 to 5 first downs on the prior drive to the point where we have nothing left to go win that football game.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I'm recalling now out of my head. I've watched it, once since then. But I mean, I just remember sitting in the press box watching them get pressure with 4, and a couple of times I think even 3 guys, because they're just pinning their ears back and coming, and that requires a certain attack mode from a passing offense standpoint.
Well, they know. I mean, they've got the gazelle is got 3 legs, and it's the lion going for the jugular now, and they just know that they've got us. They
was too graphic.
Have to see it through. Yes,
that was way too graphic. The gazelle running with 3 legs. That's what Ohio State's running attack looked like. A gazelle running with 3 legs into the fence around the Kalamahari or whatever game preserve it is. I'm telling you, I just can't get over. I've covered 41 Ohio State Michigan games. I can't get over what I saw from the standpoint of the game plan offensively. And I know it was windy. I mean, it was not windy. It was really, kind of high level breezy, but it was cold, I mean, it was very cold. But because I almost froze to death in our pregame tailgate show. There's a picture of me on the internet, on Twitter somewhere, or excuse me, X, formerly known as Twitter, of me with my toboggan on. It looked like I am a popsicle. So I understood the conditions. But you know what? Jeremiah Smith's out there with very short sleeves on. He's from Fort Lauderdale. I mean, he's from South Florida. He's ready to get it on. He got targeted, I think, 6 times. Maybe the best receiver in the country was targeted 6 times.
Will Howard's a PA kid who then went to Kansas, which ain't which ain't California or Florida, right? Then comes back to Columbus, So, and I'm sure if he's competed for state championships at the high school level, he played in late November football in Kansas, which isn't
windy, baby,
sunny, right? So, I think it's a BS excuse, and frankly, here's the other side of it. If Michigan saw the path to winning the football game was playing great run defense and running the football and shortening the game, if we're Ohio State and we recruit the best of the best around this great nation, why can't we do the same? Why can't we? I know you have to throw the football with all of our talent, but let's just say we set them on the side. Let's get heavy people, and line up and go bludgeon Michigan. And frankly, that's the recipe. If we can't throw the football down the field because they're going to play soft, they're going to double Jeremiah. They have to force the ball, to Ibuka or Carnell Tate. And Carnell Tate obviously let us down in a big moment. And that's the thing. You went out and probably paid, and I mean, I'll rattle off a number, north of $1.5 million for our backfield. And you can't turn around and have them get yards. What good are they?
Yeah.
What good are they? Maybe we should flip it. Maybe pay the big dogs. Go out and get linemen. Go spend $3 million on an offensive line and spend $1 million on the backfield, because if you don't have the holes and you can't create the seams for them to run through, then what do they matter?
The only picture you needed from the fourth quarter that lets you know Michigan had the upper hand was when they jumped into 8-man lines. I mean,
Yeah.
that lets you know symbolically that you had let Michigan get to the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game. You had let Michigan, a year after winning a national championship and losing seemingly almost
18,
everybody,
18 players to the draft. 18
and
players were
and
drafted
your
from that team.
coaching staff is gutted, and you've got some guys, you've got a coaching staff that a lot of people, through the year have equated to almost a high-level MAC coaching staff in derision. Uh, but they schemed their way all the way to
And
a fourth
Tim, hold
straight.
and also and I know that Hammer may still drop on some cheating scheme, but let's just say all those 18 players that they had go get drafted, and Harbaugh and his whole staff that have all gone to, onto the NFL,
Yeah.
and now you have this staff, like, and now they don't know our plays, but yet they know a brand of football that it doesn't seem that we know how to play.
Yes. And that was what Ryan Day wanted to get fixed, was the ability to run the ball against anybody. As I pointed out on a couple of videos with lettermenrow.com, couldn't do it against Nebraska, couldn't do it against Indiana, really. You know what I'm talking about? And yeah, Indiana was undefeated and whatever, couldn't run the ball against either one of them. And wait a minute. Now, I am not forgetting the fact that they've lost, really, when you count Zen Mikulski, they lost 3 starters to injury for the year from this offensive line. The guy that took Josh Simmons' place got hurt, Zen Mikulski. And then, of course, Seth McLaughlin, maybe the best center in college football. Uh, I understand what the challenges were, but you know what? So did the coaching staff. And I'm looking at Mason Graham, that Kenneth Grant guy. Those guys, those guys were men among boys at times on against Ohio State this year. Why would you ever, that's like going into a bar and picking out the biggest, baddest guy. I'm going to punch him straight in the mouth and let's see what happens. Uh,
Yeah.
you had the three best. You had the best threesome of wide receivers in the country, and I know it was blustery, but you know what? You still threw the ball. When you need to get a touchdown before halftime, you threw the ball and scored a touchdown. So why not go in? Why not get into that scheme and just do it repeatedly and see if they stop it? You know what I mean? And but no, you got to be tough, man. You got to be Mr. Tuffy, and that's too bad.
Yeah.
And that, my friend, is not on the players. That, my friend, is on the coaches. That, my friend, is on the game plan. If I don't know why you felt like you had to go to game plan. Let's say it was game plan B or C because of the cold weather and the wind, which I don't think you had to get to. It wasn't that windy. Um, I'm just at a loss because here's the thing: you were talking about the backfield. I'm looking at a coaching staff, with Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles. That's about what, $15 million, just those 3 guys alone. Uh, you know, it's got to be better than that. You've got to be. Uh, I don't know any other way of putting it. Is they were. I'm talking about the offensive side of the thing was intent on showing how tough they were, and they can argue that. They can say 33 passes. I don't care. You should have thrown 43. That's my look at it. When your best receiver in the country is targeted 6 times, I think it was. I may have that number wrong for Jeremiah Smith. That's not enough. That wasn't good
Right.
enough.
Well, Tim, I think it's also strategically, if the wind is even a factor, and again, regardless whether it's going north and south or east and west, um, there's 2 times in a football game, a first and third or second and fourth quarter, where the wind benefits one of the
You
2 teams, unless it's just straight blustery left. You mean, again, across from sideline to sideline, not necessarily long ways.
right.
So
That was third
from a
quarter
game
for
flow
Ohio State.
standpoint, and again, only because I'm like fresh out of a high school football season where like you've got high school quarterbacks who and high school coaches calling plays to be a little bit looser and take their shots with the wind behind this young quarterback throwing to high school receivers, where you're going to be a little bit looser, a little bit more, typical offense. And then you tighten things up a little bit, right? You've got to
Yep.
maybe short passes, jet pass, jet sweeps, maybe bubble screens, perimeter screens, and run game. When you're playing with that wind in your face, and that ball may flutter, you might not have the gas on it that you need. A common person, you can go play a turkey bowl on Thanksgiving morning
Yeah.
and know when you're going one way, you throw it, and then otherwise you got to be a little bit more strategic with the football. It's I
By the
think
way,
it's a
by the way, by the way, I used to like. I was always our quarterback because I didn't like getting hit. You know what I mean? When we were
yeah,
growing up, and we would play some fairly sophisticated turkey bowls where me and my three brothers and like five other guys would be the our team, and we'd be playing in another neighborhood. And I always loved it because other neighborhood used to like to jump into zone defenses, in a turkey bowl, and I love that because all you got to do.
yeah,
I loved it because then instead of throwing curls and out cuts, and I'm hitting guys on the run. You know what I mean? I was
yeah.
always really
In the
good
windows.
in the
Yeah.
windows, and I just loved it when. Now my point is, am I equating myself to anybody of any quarterback of ilk? No, but the point is, there's always a way to beat the defense. You got you've got talented receivers who can run great routes. There's always a way to beat the defense, and you have
Well, Tim,
four,
the crazy thing I know,
yeah,
but
four sometimes
we're
five options on a play to beat them with.
but Tim, not only that, that's say on the coaches, but like there's ways to beat a defense. You know how you do it? With better players.
Yeah,
And I think that's why Buckeye Nation is a little beside itself right now, is because we felt like we have superior coaches, and we certainly on paper, have better players. And I think that's why the frustration level is up to here in this last result, being able to score only 10 points. And because of all the things that we felt expectations and again, I'll say some of the hot air coming out of that place, And I think lastly, going back, and I mean, I feel bad about it, and this might be the perfect transition to what happened after the game, but like I felt so great to have, and I referenced the Jack Sawyer interception, but to have a Columbus kid, 5-star, stay home, go to Ohio State. I've met Jack on the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer. He's an awesome dude.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and to have him make that play in that game, and now because of the result, have it essentially be meaningless, is hard because when I got goosebumps when Jack Sawyer, Ohio kid, Columbus kid, Buckeye makes that play
Yeah,
in the game,
yeah.
and we didn't pay it off. We didn't pay it off on the next drive. We didn't pay it off in the game, and I think that's why you saw someone who is going to now have to live with being 0-4 against Ohio State and wearing against Michigan, in an Ohio State uniform, and we'll have to move on to whatever's next for Jack Sawyer. That's now competing for a national championship,
Yeah.
given where we're at
Yeah.
and our standing in the college football playoff,
Well,
which we'll
hey,
find out here in about a week.
which is funny because that's the point he made to Mason Graham in that argument. And you've seen video of it. You're not going anywhere. Basically he's making the point. We're going to the college football playoff and you're not. And Mason Graham's
Right.
basically going, hey, we just beat y'all 4 straight times, and uses a bad word.
Yeah. But I also think so. Like that's you have to win one. It goes back to my narrative about the construction of how Michigan makes this a game, which they did. I also think, and I mentioned it not only to you and and our viewers here, but also on multiple other phone calls, is there's some factions of Buckeye Nation that would be completely satisfied beating Michigan every year, and potentially maybe not winning another game on our schedule.
Yeah.
And we're gonna sleep pretty well. Where a national championship, which is extremely rare, or even competing for one. And we saw
Hold your
that,
ring up. Hold your ring
only
up.
having the opportunity, right? Only having one opportunity out of the last 3 years that we had lost to Michigan, one opportunity, we lucked our way into the Final Four, which is now 12. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like one of your, I know now that it's different, but like one of your goals, is only attainable in most cases if you win this football game.
Correct.
So like, winning a national championship, to be honest with you, is going to be, immensely satisfying. But you have to win what now? 4 football games?
Yep.
4.
Yep.
Whereas and I know that, but winning this one and potentially not winning those 4 does not leave you with this feeling of this $20+ million roster has given us a bunch of regular season victories to celebrate and not much else.
All right. What if this game had been played 7th week, 8th week of the year, like Penn State was, and Ohio State lost again to Michigan, but then on Saturday they beat let's say Indiana or Illinois, uh, and moved on, didn't make the conference championship game because of the law, two losses to Oregon and Michigan, would anybody be feeling any better today? You understand what I'm saying?
Oh
Because
yeah,
now there's the possibility of saving your season uh, with a there's a possibility of saving your season uh, with a win in the college football playoffs, wins in the college football playoff. Would anybody be feeling any better? Because at one point in time, before the night, I think it was the 1930s, the Michigan game was not the last game of the year. Illinois was.
right.
So
Yeah,
would anybody be feeling any better? I mean, I'm just asking you. You're a
I
former
think so.
player,
Yes,
alum, fan.
sure. I think you do because you've distanced yourself by that time from the potential, loss against your rival. And it's not, and again, I know that we're now what, 4 days, 5 days removed from losing this football game,
Yep.
and the emotions are still high, but they're not what they were had we, recorded this the day after, or even, on a Monday. But we've distanced ourselves. And so I think, yes, you still feel the way you feel. And there's like I said, factions of Buckeye Nation that will still be disappointment and hang their hat on that. But you now have that shiny object, which is a national championship, really right in front of your face. And we now, and I think emotionally, have to distance ourselves from this loss. Players, coaches, Buckeye Nation has to tune out the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis, because we should be playing in that by all means. And so that's going to be emotionally draining. And then also rely on a committee to decide our future as opposed to deciding it ourselves. And I'll think lastly, this is the one thing that popped into my head after last year's game, losing again in Ann Arbor, was I went to our lack of handling the emotions by what appeared in the Cotton Bowl against Missouri.
Yeah.
And will that same type of emotional distress happen and carry over to whoever we play in our potential first round in the college football playoff? That, we couldn't, I guess it just, you have to rally the troops. And I know that we're going to have time to overcome these emotions, but it's a lot. And this is something that these seniors can't undo. And I think Joe Klatt saying it, and I mean, I've mentioned his name a bunch, but there's no player on Ohio State's roster that's ever beaten Michigan. That's sad.
Yeah. Final question for Matt Wilhelm, alum, member of a 2002 national championship team, observer of the scene. The question is, and has been since the game was over, what does Ryan Day need to do to recapture Buckeye Nation? Or has Ryan Day, I know it's a tough question, but can you leave it all riding on what happens in Ohio State versus Michigan? And the reason I'm asking that is, in calmer times, no, you can't. But I will hasten to point out that not getting over this hump since 2019, they didn't play in 2020. They beat the heck out of them in 2019, Ryan Day's first year, and played and won a Big Ten championship. My point is, the last four games, Michigan's victory has kept Ohio State from getting to the Big Ten championship, which is the initial goal of every season, is to get to and win the Big Ten championship. They haven't even gotten to the game. I'm throwing that in there just as an explanation. What is your sense on what should be done, or what are the parameters where Ryan Day keeps to get doing his job, even though he's only lost 10 games in 6 seasons?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to be the one to throw my name in the hat that says, Ryan Day needs to be fired. I'm just not going to be that guy. Again, I think Ryan Day, the human, Ryan Day, the dad, Ryan Day,
The recruiter.
is a great, the recruiter. He's a great guy. He has to, and I'm sure every year at this time he does some introspective looking at what can I do, and I think what I'm going to volunteer is probably something that he might have done, but I would say, frankly, I would fly on a private jet or fly them in. I'd fly, Urban Meyer in for a 48-hour term and I know that, Coach Tressel's been in and around the program a lot recently as well, and picked their brain because they're going to want what's best for Ohio State. They're going to want what's best for Ryan Day. They're going to want to see this trend flip. I also believe that because of who they are and what they've accomplished, that Ryan Day, and I'm not trying to say he would be, defensive in any mean. I mean, there's not a lot to defend when it comes to this game for him, but he would sit there and take copious notes and learn maybe potentially all the little tricks, all the little nuances, all the little points of emphasis that maybe they employed or implored when they were coaches that maybe Ryan Day's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the little buttons. And I think, and I know for us, as we talk through this football game, we can go back and diagnose, 5 or 6 moments that were maybe potentially the difference in the football game.
Yeah.
But there's probably 25 that if you really slowed the game down and looked at it, like one block, one tackle, one catch.
Yep.
There's 25 of them that when you go back and watch, and maybe watch through a critical lens, that you might sometimes, pass by, that some of these and that's what we did with Coach Tress, is we studied this game play by play, as a team in a team meeting room, and talk about ball play, a kickoff placement being 2 yards deeper or 2 yards to the left, or little things like that matter in a football game, but more so are accentuated in a rivalry game like this that means so much to so many. So that's what I think I would do. And then, next I would just attempt to build a roster to not go win a national championship, but to build a roster to go beat Michigan. Because to your point, just of the latter, was it has kept us out of the Big Ten championship game the last 3 seasons, and now a 4th season. It's also kind of like kept us out of playing for a national championship in 2 of the last 3. And it's going to take this expansion, otherwise we likely would be outside looking in if it was still a 14 playoff because of this loss. So only because of this expansion. So, and I'm not trying to say overturn the roster so much to basically build a Michigan-like roster. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying find the people, find the players, find the coaches that can coach to beat Michigan in their current standing. And for right now, and I know they're going to get the Underwood kid, which is completely flipping on its head, right? Getting a 5-star kid and making $12.5 million. It's not just going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So Michigan's going to change. And I'm sure Underwood's going to bring star receivers and running backs and players that are going to want to play in Michigan with him in their next 4 or 5 years. So they may change. But if we're good at our job, we have to understand that and go recruit a team and coach a team that can go win that football game, because that goal, as Ryan Day and many of these seniors have stated, is the number one goal and is the path to the Big Ten championship game and competing and winning a national championship.
Last question. I know I said that, but I always have question B. You know that. You've been around me way too much.
Of course.
Really, when you boil it down to last Saturday, and I hate saying this out loud, Ohio State missed 2 very makeable field goals. Michigan made 2 field goals. One was a 53, 54-yarder. My point is, Ohio State got into scoring range those 2 times and came away with Zippo. You understand what I'm saying? As much as you, I'm meaning we all, were on the offense, they really did muster enough potential offense to win that game. And I keep going back to the W was all that mattered. How much does that really bother you when you sit that right down and think about it, how close they really were to winning that game?
Yeah, it's tough. You hate to put it on one kick or 2 kicks for that matter. But I think, the defense and again, the Jack Sawyer turnover, the defense did enough to keep them out of the end zone multiple times.
Yep.
I think but then you also pair the 2 Will Howard mistakes, one which led to an ensuing touchdown. And then also, the other that, kind of, set up, the juncture of the game to allow them to just play Michigan football and bleed the game out. And I think, and more so than anything, it's maintain control. And I think that's what's the most far-fetched notion that I would have never thought would have happened, is that Michigan, from scoring first till final whistle, control the football game. I mean, at no point did an Ohio State coach, player, fan, reporter ever feel like, oh, we're just going to run away with this thing. We've got control. It was because it was the missed field goal, right? That just knocked us down a peg. And then it was an interception that just knocked us down a peg. It was another missed field goal that knocked us down a peg. It was another interception that knocked us down a peg. And you never
Yeah,
felt, and all you did was to I mean, one of your initial points is just continue to play into Michigan's roster construction and coaching style of control, and they're not going to do something stupid to beat themselves. And you thought the red zone pick by the young quarterback, by Jack Sawyer was the mistake that would have led the other way. But those ensuing 3 plays from Ohio State and their lack of production on those 3 plays, and I know a Carnell Tate drop, as we addressed already,
yeah,
was one big play. But that flipped it right back on its head by having to punt it back to them and then go on the drive that they did to go kick
yeah.
that field
Punt,
goal.
punt it back into the wind, back to them.
Right.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorite people in all the world, Matt Wilhelm.
Oh,
Uh, I keep saying, his last name starts with a W. That's all Ohio State needed on Saturday. You know what? The
seriously.
fans might be bickering today that they only won 16-13, but they would take it in a heartbeat. They would take it in a heartbeat because they would have gotten their rematch against Oregon.
Yes.
A winnable rematch against Oregon because we've already seen the first edition, and it didn't happen. And the point about it is, Matt, and you know this, you played football forever. Uh, the sun does come up the next day. If it doesn't,
It
we got
does.
big major problems other than football. But the sun does come up the
Absolutely.
next day, and you players and stuff have to rebound from it. I think one of the best remedies for this team, I think this team is still very talented. One of the best remedies
Agreed.
for this team over the next 2 3 weeks, it knows it's playing somebody somewhere with a chance to play for a national championship down the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that's going to be the hardest is, again, and that's why I immediately went back to last year's bowl season, not playing in the Big Ten championship game and then playing in the Cotton Bowl is, and I know you're playing for a potential national championship, not just a bowl game, is time won't necessarily, at least not for the foreseeable future, maybe the next couple of weeks, maybe a week after the Big Ten championship game when you know who you're playing and you really start your prep. Time won't heal this wound,
Right.
especially not for the players on this team that know what this represents, that know that this is their last shot. It won't heal this wound. You can't distance yourself away from it. It's going to chase you historically forever. Um, but then when you find out your opponent, and this is what's also by losing this football game, we talked about a little bit. You put your future in the hands of someone else. You don't control the narrative anymore by appearing in the Big Ten championship game and being able to undo your one loss to an Oregon football team, likely taking over the number one spot in all polls, being the number one team in the country, having a first round bye, which we talked about, and what an advantage it is for a team that's been beaten up and battered after a very long season for these college kids. You don't control that. And I think now depending on the opinion of what this loss means and the results of these championship games, is we could potentially not. We would love to play an SEC football team or a warm weather team in cold Columbus, Ohio at the Horseshoe one more time, right? Before you go play in these luxurious bowl games now.
Oh, wait
But
a minute. I don't know if do
we
you
may
really
not
want
have
that?
that.
Do you really want that based on what you saw Ohio State playing in cold weather just a few days ago?
Potentially, I mean, maybe, but I think there's a learning lesson associated with it. But then I would also just say, going to Bama, going to Georgia,
Yeah,
going to Tennessee, while they will be in warm weather, these are like top 10 college football environments,
venues. Yeah,
venues, environments for the home team. And again, I know Georgia, watched the Georgia survive eight overtimes to Georgia Tech. Those seniors had never lost at home.
yeah,
So that's 4 years or 5 years of football players that have never lost a home game at Georgia. So that just goes to show what an environment that is for college football, a college football game, and
yeah.
an advantage as well.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see, ladies and gentlemen. This time next week, we're going to be talking about where Ohio State's going to be playing and who they're going to be playing. And will it be the Volunteers? Will it be a rematch with Indiana? Will it be something else? Who knows? You can't do anything about what just happened. That's 4 in a row losses to Michigan. And as my friend and colleague here, Matt Wilhelm, pointed out, nothing's going to heal that wound. It's still going to be it's still going to be bleeding a year from now when Ohio State takes a field again versus Michigan. But for Matt Wilhelm, I want to thank you all for watching again. And until next week, we'll see you then.